All right. So it is 7:03 on Tuesday, December 14th. I'd like to call the Rules and Procedures Committee meeting to order. Councilors Moore, George, and Souza are present, so we have quorum. Maybe just as a quick reminder for anyone that watches this after, a lot of our focus right now is trying to manage some changes to the charter. There are a lot of changes, and so we as a committee are still sort of working through the most efficient way to do that. So you'll see some of that play out in real time. Another thing just to note, Ed Evaldi is in the audience, agreed to join us. Thank you, Ed. As we come up to each of the changes, we thought it would make sense for Ed to just sort of talk a little bit about the prior work done on the change, just to make sure that we're connecting our discussions back to any history that could have been discussed in other committees. So with that, our first agenda item is public comment. I don't think we have anyone else. And Ed, I think you were planning to join us in the actual content, but do we have any public comment? All right. So why don't we go ahead and move into the actual ordinances. The first ordinance is FY 21012. This is the admin code change for part 2, chapter 1, article 2. If you remember, we were advised to actually try to hold this in committee until the other changes associated with redistricting went through town council. Those are still active. So I think, so the advice here is to probably postpone this one more time to a date certain until those other changes make it through the town council, and then we can come back and align this with that. If that is agreeable, I would entertain a motion to postpone to a date certain.
So moved. I'll second it.
Great, thank you. We can do a roll call vote.
We have to do a roll call vote.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Sean. All right, we will do a roll call vote. Councilor George?
Yes.
All right, Councilor Souza?
Yes.
All right, and then I am a yes. So the motion passes. And then Sean or Frank, just a quick question. When we postpone to a date certain, does that mean by the end of this meeting, we have to pick that date?
We don't have to, but I think as a good practice, we probably should look at calendars and come up with another date. And then barring any unforeseen circumstances, we know that that date is good for all three of us.
Okay, great.
I think in the past, we've gotten the habit of doing it on the fly, and it'd probably be a good idea to try to get something down. It can change as we've seen, but it'll probably be a good idea. We're all on the phone.
Yeah, perfect. So we'll create maybe a calendar for the next couple of meetings. Great. Okay. So I'll move on to the next one. This is Ordinance D FY 22002. This was the amendment for the correction of typographical and punctuation errors. This one is kind of tricky. If you remember, the advice that we received from council was that we would actually have to create an amendment or an exhibit for this that showed all of the specific changes. And the tricky thing about doing that now is we may end up actually changing that as we go through and change the charter. So the recommendation here is to also postpone this and address the punctuation and typographical changes a little later in the process after we've actually changed some of the content itself. And then we would essentially use this as like a sweeper activity to go through and catch anything that wasn't otherwise changed. So I think the advice here is also to postpone to a date certain. Does that sound right to the team?
Yeah, I'd make that motion.
Okay, great, thank you so much.
I'll second that motion.
Great. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Great, and I'm also a yes, so that passes with 3 yeses. All right, so the next one I think is actually, in addition to us discussing it, I think this is also an opportunity for us to align on how we might be able to tackle some of these. But before I get into it, the next agenda item is FY 22003. This is the town charter Article 4, Town Manager Temporary Absence. And maybe before I get into my content, Ed, I know you're in the audience. Is there any history on this one that you'd like to provide before we dive in?
Sure, and thanks for allowing me to add some value here tonight to your meeting. So when the Charter Review Committee looked at this one, we felt that we tried to go through every potential scenario where the town manager may have to step away for a short period of time, and scenarios where the assistant town manager may or may not be available or may not be qualified to take the position. We also talked about department heads and sort of all the different scenarios that we could think of. And so we felt that it would be valuable to give the town manager options. Now, obviously, having the assistant town manager be the first priority would be something that the town manager should consider. But we could think of situations where maybe for whatever reason, the assistant town manager may not be in a position to take that for whatever reason. Maybe there's health reasons, maybe there's emotional issues, whatever the issues may be. There may be a reason why the assistant town manager should not be acting. So that's where we gave the town manager an option, and we said either could appoint the assistant or could choose to appoint from the department head. So it wasn't necessarily a mandate to definitely go with the assistant town manager, but it was more of an option that gives them a little more leeway in terms of selecting that temporary person.
Okay, thanks, Ed. I appreciate it. Any questions for Ed before we dive in?
So I'm reading the order. So I hear what you're saying, Ed, but the way I'm reading this is, town manager shall act in the absence of the assistant town manager, right? In the absence of the town manager. If there's no assistant town manager and the town manager is unable to act, then the council president shall appoint an interim town manager until the town manager is able to perform his or her duties. So, I mean, in essence, though, Ed, what this is saying to me is the assistant town manager, basically, if the town manager is out, say that, he or she goes out on medical, whatever the case may be. I mean, to be honest, if the assistant town manager cannot act as the interim town manager, barring what you have said, because there wouldn't be a assistant town manager if that person, he or she was out on medical or things like that. But if they're in the role, if they're in the position, then we've got a bigger problem if the town manager goes out and the assistant town manager in that role is deemed not acceptable to be the interim. I think where I'm reading this is if the town manager goes out and the assistant town manager is not in the role, then we didn't really have a succession plan of where it goes. So what this is saying is that the council president would be the person who appoints the interim until the town manager is able to come back, or maybe they declare they're not coming back, which such we would start the whole process of hiring a permanent town manager. Am I reading that correctly as it is in the ordinance, or am I not reading it correctly?
Yeah, I think that's my understanding too, Sean. Ed, I don't know if you have.
Yeah, well, I think the way I read it, it sort of mandates. It says the the temporary absence shall be amended such that the assistant town manager shall act in the absence.
Yep.
Now, what if there's an issue with the assistant town manager, but that person is still there physically, they're performing the role, but the town manager doesn't feel comfortable for whatever reason that the person should act for the 3 or 4 weeks or whatever it might be. The way it's worded right now, it's mandated. It has to be, if the person is in that role, it has to be that person.
Well, what's the definition of temporary absence?
It's less than 30 days.
Okay. So, Ed, if I understand this correctly, if the town manager is going to be out more than 30 days, he or she doesn't have the ability. They're going out basically on disability. I don't think they have the authority or the ability to name their successor.
Yeah.
So if again, and I understand what you're saying, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but in all seriousness, if the assistant town manager cannot take the role, then the town manager, if they come back, has a lot of answering to do to the council, because in like any organization, if you've got a manager and assistant manager, and if the manager goes out and the assistant manager can't take the job, then the assistant manager shouldn't be there in the first place. So I would think that if, we don't have an assistant town manager and then the town manager goes out, then the council president steps in and can appoint a temporary one. It says here, like a department head or someone that's going to be the interim in that role, which I understand. But I think if we interpret it that even though there is I'll say acting or whatever the case is, assistant town manager, but their boss goes out, but they're deemed not an acceptable temporary replacement, we got a much bigger problem there.
Yeah. Frank?
Yeah, I think what we're looking at here is a couple of things. Okay. One, of course, just like Sean said, if the person is in that position, that person should be qualified. If not, then it's the town manager's responsibility to see that that person is qualified in the event that he leaves, okay? The other situation that we have to look at is there's nothing preventing that position from being empty, vacant, when he or she has to go out. So now we have to look at two scenarios here, okay? That person could actually be out for health issues, okay? Or have left the job altogether. Okay, so now we've got to look at these two scenarios and say, this part addresses this, but if that person is in that position and available, that person will take over for that time period. If there's not a fill, then we go to this other route.
Right,
go ahead. Just make another comment here. So, life happens to people. So the assistant town manager could be very well qualified for that position, but timing is everything. So if the town manager has to leave, and what if the assistant town manager for some reason was going through some sort of a personal crisis in their lives, and they didn't feel they could perform the role that was required of them? The way this is written, it mandates that the assistant town manager has to do it. And all I'm saying is that you can't necessarily know every situation that's going to happen, and you're going to lock yourself into something that might not work out.
It's a temporary absence, though. So I understand what you're saying. We're not locking ourselves in for 6 months or a year or indefinitely. I mean, Ed, I would equate it this way. If the town manager is going to go out on a 2-week vacation, then the assistant town manager should be in charge for those 2 weeks. If I were made aware that the town manager made the police chief his interim town manager while he's gone, then we're going to have a real conversation about why is it that the assistant town manager is not qualified to step in while they're out, be it vacation, be a temporary absence. And I hear what you're saying about trying to cover it. But if they're going through a crisis, then the assistant town manager should not be in the role until he or she can address that crisis, because it's keeping them from their job duties. So I would, and this is my opinion, right? I'm only one of 3 and one of 9, but I'm not saying I'm not trying to argue that you're wrong. What I'm saying is if all of a sudden we make it so that the assistant town manager isn't automatically in for a temporary coverage of the town manager, and the town, then what's the role of the assistant town manager? It's not administrative or things of that nature. That's supposed to be their de facto backup for a multitude of things, be it everyday things, or if the town manager goes out for a couple weeks vacation or even a week's vacation, that should be the order of succession. It's not the right term, but I think you get what I'm saying here. But yeah, I mean, if all of a sudden now we're deathly afraid that the assistant town manager is not qualified to do a temporary coverage, then I'll be blunt, they shouldn't be in the job.
So Sean, I think what we felt that the charter should not force the manager to go with a particular person. The way it's worded, and I'm glad, Eric, you put this up here, the city manager may appoint the assistant city manager or a person from the department heads. We wanted to give them flexibility.
Yeah. So maybe if I could jump in here, I think there are a couple things. Maybe first, if I could just sort of explain how I'm sort of documenting this, and you can give me feedback on that, and then we'll jump back into the feedback. So the order itself, I believe we need to turn that into the actual language and then bring that language back to the town council. And so that's sort of like my intention, is the way to like work through these different requests. And so what I'm doing is capturing the current language, the language recommended by the charter committee, and then the language that will come out of this committee to be returned to council for debate and ultimately an action. And what I'm also trying to do is capture those kind of like key notes and concerns that we're talking about. So I think one key fact is we believe that the assistant town manager should be qualified to fill that role for 30 days. Like I think all, at least in our discussion, I'm aligned, I think Frank and Sean are too, that that person should be qualified. And I think you raise an interesting point. If for some reason they opt out, what do we do? Right. And so I think, having some language in there that says if they decline, here's the next step, could make sense. But as Sean said, we would immediately have a conversation with the town manager about that. So, your appointed assistant declined the appointment. So I think that's one fact I've heard. A few other things just to call out based on looking at this and looking at some other towns. The new language actually doesn't describe the formal process of, sort of putting that person in charge. And so I think some of the other clauses we see do have language about, this is our existing language just to, like this happens by filing a letter with the clerk to say, I am no longer in charge, this other person is. And so I think there was some concern with the language, the newer language not having that. There's this question, if the assistant town manager isn't available for whatever reason, they decline the appointment or they're sick or out of town, we need language for that. Other towns also included language in here about who can't act in that role. Many other towns specifically said that the town council, members of the town council can't be appointed as the town manager, which seems to make sense as a conflict of interest.
Wouldn't want the job, but sorry.
Yeah, that's true. And then just one other thing, there is some question as like, how does this end? What is the process for the town manager saying, okay, I'm back? And specifically when we talk about actions beyond 30 days, are we now sort of putting someone in full-time, and is that sort of a separate set of language? So I'm just raising those, and we can circulate these. I'm raising those because I think those are just additional considerations that aren't specifically addressed in the language, and we probably just need to work through as a committee. And so what I did is I just took a stab. We can rip this up if we don't like it or change it, but I took a stab at trying to get language that I think preserves the intent of the original ordinance, which could be amended later, but tries to preserve that intent and addresses some of the themes in the recommendation and also some of the gaps that we might have from a legal perspective. And so this is what I'm proposing. And maybe before I get into it, you know, Sean and Frank, you've been through this process before. Is this the right output that we're trying to produce? Is what is the actual language we want to bring back to council to support this order? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, what you want to do is come out to what we would recommend the council support. Now, remember too, at the council level, it can change, right? You can go in a totally different direction, but part of what we should be doing is not only explaining what we would propose, but kind of why. And the other thing too, Eric, is we may not all three just agree on something, which is fine, right? So it can come out of committee a 2-1 or 3-0 or whatever the case may be. So as I caution, my opinion is of my opinion, but obviously yours could be different and Frank's could be different. And at the end of the day, you as the committee chair would bring this to a vote for us on whatever's proposed, and it's either a yay or nay.
Got it. Yeah. Thanks, Sean. I appreciate that.
Eric, if I may.
Sure.
I'm seeing one thing is missing here, just like Ed said earlier, things in life happen. We are talking about here, the town manager is leaving for a period of time, but he is still capable and physically able to appoint someone. What happens in the event, just say for an example, he has a heart attack and he's in the hospital, and the next morning you learn he's in the hospital, there's no way he's going to be coming down to appoint somebody to take his place. If we're going to do this, then in my own opinion is we should look at a couple of scenarios and maybe put together, what's happening here is perfectly okay if he is capable of saying, I'm going to go out. If he has a scheduled surgery, for an example, he knows when he leaves, he's got an estimated time how long he's going to be out. Then it's easy for him to appoint someone.
Yeah, that's a great point. So maybe let me describe the language, and I think it may address what you just raised, Frank. Mm-hmm. But if it doesn't, or if there's other ideas here,
okay.
Let me know. So I think there's sort of this first thing that just describes the fact that we would ideally like the assistant town manager to be appointed. And so I had, in the event of a temporary absence of not more than 30 days of the town manager shall appoint the assistant town manager to perform the duties of that office during that period by a letter filed with the town clerk in the town council. So just with that piece, it's saying if he knows he's going to be out, he has to appoint the town clerk, and the assistant town manager, and he's going to do that by giving a letter to the town clerk and to us, the council. So we now know that this has happened. And then now we're starting to get into like the what ifs, I think. And the what ifs are, if the town manager fails to make an appointment prior to the start of an absence, so they've gone out unexpected, something happens, kind of like the heart attack scenario, or the assistant town manager declines the appointment. So I think to Ed's earlier point, there's something going on, they're heading off to a wedding and they're just like, I can't do this. Then the town council president shall appoint a qualified employee of the town to fill the duties of the office. So we basically say, in this scenario where it's unexpected, or this assistant town manager declines for, because life or whatever reason, then the town council president will make the appointment. And they'll do that the same way that, like Matt, essentially in this case, would write a letter to the town clerk. Town manager's out, we officially sort of declare him out, and then that letter goes to the clerk and to the town council. And I think this covers the scenario that Ed mentioned, really like that wedding scenario. Let's say. And then I think there's this other clause where if that absence ends up being longer, right, it's not just a temporary absence anymore, it's beyond 30 days, then the town council can appoint a capable person to perform the duties of the town manager. And then this appointment, I think actually we probably need to figure out how long that appointment lasts. But my thinking here was, if this is going to be a longer term thing, I think it's probably good to get the voice of the full council behind it versus just like the idea that the town council president can appoint the longer term one as well. But that's a personal opinion. I think if there are others, but I tried to sort of split it into those three scenarios. Best case scenario, manager, the town manager knows they're out, they appoint the assistant, everything works. The backup plan is if town manager goes out unexpectedly or the assistant town manager isn't available, town council president gets to pick. If that goes longer than 30 days, then the whole town council gets to pick. And then just this other language of town council can't act as the town manager. Does that make sense? And is that a kind of a good way to cover these different scenarios? Or are there other opinions, different ways we might think of this?
I mean, again, my own personal opinion on this is that kind of to Frank's point, if I guess you have to plan for the worst, hope for the best. I would like to see it personally that the first step for the interim is automatic. Now you bring up good points. The assistant town manager may not be able to do the role for, some things that you brought, I didn't even think of, but if the town manager is incapacitated, then I would want the automatic first step is the assistant town manager. If the assistant town manager cannot do it, then we know it goes to the council president, and the council president goes through the process of determining who it is. And Eric, to your point, as much as it is you want to say who it can be, it's probably more important to say who it can't be. Can't be anyone in the town council, things like that, which I totally get. But if we have it so that it's at the option of the town manager and the town manager can't make that decision, then we're kind of in a quandary, right? Because there's nothing, and I don't want to get this too complicated. There's what addresses the fact that the town manager cannot make that decision. Then we're sitting there. What's the mechanism to determine that he or she can't make it? And then we have to step in. I would say that it should, again, in my opinion, go to the assistant town manager. The assistant town manager can't take it, then it goes to the council president to name the interim under the temporary absence. But again, if you and Frank don't agree with that, I understand. I mean, that's part of the reason why we're here.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Sean. So I'm thinking maybe if I change the language in the second paragraph to be something like, if the town manager fails to make an appointment prior to the start. So this is a scenario like, okay, what's the automatic thing? Town manager didn't do this and all of a sudden he's out. I think we could put in there, the town assistant town manager shall assume the duties. If the assistant town manager declines the appointment, the town council president shall appoint. Like some language like that. Would that address what you're describing, Sean? That's what
I would propose in that scenario. So that in an emergency situation where a lot of times this is, we know the next step. We also know if the next step can't be accomplished, there's no decision making on that. It goes to the next step, which is the council president going through the interim process of finding someone to take it for a short term.
Right. Okay. I think, and we can wordsmith this a little bit, but I think this language might handle what you just described. Right.
But again, I'm not sitting here saying that Ed and the Charter Review Committee is wrong. I don't agree with the process, but I agree that it needs to be firmed up. It is super squishy.
Yeah. So I think I'm aligned with that too. Frank, do you have any questions on this?
I think that sounds good. Yep.
Okay. And then maybe before I close out, Ed, I know that the committee had similar discussions to the ones we're having. Is there anything that we aren't thinking of in this new sort of version? And do you think this new version gives the flexibility you described, where for whatever reason the assistant town manager declines or isn't available? We've got a backup plan. Does this cover that?
Yeah, I think it does. I guess, one thing that we also talked about was the delineation between how much of the process goes in the charter versus goes in the administrative code. Because normally the charter defines sort of a what, and then the administrative code would take that and further delineate the how. So as long as you feel comfortable that the detail you're providing is not something that should be in the administrative code, but belongs in the charter, then I think you've covered everything pretty much.
Well, and Ed, you bring up an excellent point. That may be something, since we're going to keep some things in committee, for the next one. Eric, that may be a question to pose to Jason. Where does this sit better? Does it sit better in the admin code, or does it need to sit within the charter? I don't know the answer to that. It's a great question, Ed. Wherever it needs to sit. Because the way I'm looking at this now, I said such amendment shall be effective only after approval of the town council and the state legislature. So this is gearing it towards the charter, right? Because I don't think we have to go to the state legislature to amend the admin code. But if Jason says this needs to sit within the charter, then that's where we keep it, obviously.
Yeah. I can take that action item to circle back with him and get his opinion on this. That'll be helpful. I will say, I at least when I looked at some of the other special acts that were passed at the state level, they did have this level of detail. That doesn't mean that that was right, but okay. So I think given that we think we're probably aligned on the intent, we think the language is right. Now there's just sort of this open question of, is this too much for this document versus the admin code? Should we then think about keeping this with us until we get that feedback, and then we would revise again and then send back to council?
I mean, my opinion, Frank, I don't know how you feel, is I would say yes. I mean, from a procedural perspective, and again, this is my opinion, guys, we'd probably want to do these all at the same time, have it totally focused on charter amendments, admin code amendments, and get them all done at the same time and kind of keep within the mojo of this instead of kind of doing a piecemeal. Again, my opinion. I mean, we don't want to keep this here forever, obviously. So I would say at least till our next meeting. And then if for some reason we have some things that are still delayed, maybe we discuss bringing it to the council and at least getting it approved and getting it packaged up, ready to go wherever it needs to go.
Okay. I like that too. I think the documents that I've seen, this is pushed forward. They've made some decisions about how to, if it ends up on the ballot, kind of how to divide it up on the ballot. Other decisions on, how to package it all as one thing. So I support us working through it all and then kind of giving it back as a package that can be reacted to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want anyone just to come across as I'm trying to keep it from the voters, but like I said, if this is a procedural thing, I want to put things in front of the voters so that we can keep their focus on the important things that directly affect them. I know the town manager does, don't get me wrong. But I'm also concerned, this is just a general statement, that when we bring this to the voters, if there is a huge list, it can become extremely overwhelming and really potentially disenfranchise people. But I get, on the flip side, we don't want to push through things and people don't understand why they didn't get to vote on it, which I understand. It's a delicate balancing act right here.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think I've seen some stuff that supports that. Okay, so given that, I think what we're saying is we want to probably entertain a motion to postpone this to a date certain. Does that sound right?
Well, I think we can do this. So hold on, your screen just went blank on me. Bear with me, guys. I apologize. I mean, yeah, you know what? No, we chew on what we're trying to accomplish here. I would agree with that.
Okay.
I will agree.
Okay. So I guess I will entertain a motion to postpone.
So moved.
I will second that.
Great. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Great. And I am also a yes on this. Okay. So then the next item we have on the agenda is Ordinance FY 22-004. This is the changes to the library trustees. This is actually a pretty significant change. I don't have this one documented, but I'm certainly happy to do that, maybe to prepare for our next conversation. I think for this one, a lot of this seemed to be information about, I mean, sort of like giving them more tools to sort of execute against their vision. So actually, maybe before I dive into this, Ed, is there anything that you'd like to tell us about the history of this one?
Yeah, so the trustees reached out to us early in our process and indicated that they were going to make some recommended changes to the section of the charter, which is set in Article 3. And basically, you know, through multiple conversations with them, the basic gist is that they wanted to have a little more autonomy as a group, expanding the scope of their domain. They wanted to be able to better manage how their assets come in, the collections and gifts that they receive from people. Right now, they're pretty limited on what they can and can't do. And it also, they wanted to be able to have a little more say in the how the library director position is filled. So those are just a couple of items that they brought to us. But as you said, there's a lot of verbiage there. And we went through them all. I think there's maybe 6 or 7 sub-articles. And we all voted on it and felt very supportive of what they were trying to do. So if you wanted more detail on that, you could certainly invite one of the trustees to come to one of your meetings here and give you a little more detail on it. But from our perspective, we fully supported what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And maybe just a question, Ed. Did we confirm the final language back with that team after it was created? And they said, yeah, that covers it.
Yes,
Great.
and the language that is in this ordinance is exactly the same language that we submitted in our recommendations.
Great. Any questions for Ed? Okay.
No, I've read this a couple times. I mean, one of the things that we'll probably have to do just to clean this up is what I think it says the city manager. I mean, if it's going to stay the town manager, we've got to, you know, we can't reference a city manager if we have a town manager, things like that. But that's, I'll say, grammatical in nature. No, I guess if Jason were on, I'd just say, you know, I don't think we have any other scenario where a director would be hired only at the recommendation of I'll say a committee or trustees. So I don't see a problem with it personally. I mean, I like the board. I like the library trustees to get more involved. To Ed's point, I think that's great. One of the questions we just need to look into is if we do approve this, does it adversely affect any other department head? I don't think it does. You know, like I don't think it does. So that's all. From what's recommended, I think is great. I just want to make sure that we enact this. It doesn't all of a sudden we find out, you know, there's this Council of Aging or something that all of a sudden now we have an issue with, that we just an unintended consequence. That's all.
Okay. And Sean, you think that Jason would be the one to tell us that, or is there somebody else?
No, I would just pose that to Jason. And, you know, just a general question of if this were to pass, Do we see any other area that has an advisory board or something to that, nature? Do we see this causing any any effect on them that we're not looking to do, right? We're just looking for the library director. And I could be overthinking this. So
it's a great question, just sort of the unintended consequences. Was there anything else in there? I mean, related to, I guess, sort of spending authority, those sorts of things that we would also want to validate, or we need someone else to weigh in on?
No, I mean,
okay.
No, I mean, I don't know if they should, but I don't know if the trustees are given the preliminary library budget. They should be, and getting input. I guess really, at the end of the day, it falls on our shoulders for the budget, and it falls on the town manager for the director. So, but having it in there that, information either will be shared or, someone from the trustees is directly involved in interviewing new candidates and things like that, I think are actually good things. So,
right.
I mean, Ed, looking at this, at the end of the day, it is the town manager is solely responsible for hiring the director, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So we're not changing that. It's just the process, get more people involved in the process to ultimately hire the new director.
Right. And this whole section really is about the trustees. I mean,
right.
There's verbiage that talks about how the director is selected, but they're looking for more involvement. They want to have more, not necessarily authority, but they want to be able to work more autonomously and have more decision-making power than they currently have today. And I think they're thinking about the future. Where does the library go in the future, and how much say are they going to have in terms of expanding the scope of what the library can or can't do, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and there's only one thing in here, and this would be a Jason question, just because I don't necessarily know what this means, but if you look in paragraph G, third line from the bottom going up, in the case of an employment at will situation, any period of consecutive employment for more than 1 year shall be constituted an extension. What does that mean? Like, why? Forgive it, this is going to sound bad. What's the point of this sentence? You're an employee at will. Employee at will could be a day, a year, or a decade, or a century. I don't understand what that sentence is included for.
Ed, do you have any perspective on that one?
No, I'm rereading it again myself right now.
Because my understanding is library directors aren't under contract. They're employees at will.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. No, so, I don't have anything else to offer on that one, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, I mean, something like that, Eric, where I would strike that out because I don't think it means anything, because there, in the case of an employment at will situation, every library director is an employee at will. I don't think they're contractual. Now, if you have the option of being contract or employee at will, maybe that's a different scenario, but that would just be the question of, we're not giving library directors contracts, so I don't think there's any need for that sentence.
Okay. I will make a change to strike that sentence. I'm comfortable with that too.
Yeah, because I'm 99% sure that the director is an employee at will.
Well, that you raise a good point there, because it does say in the case of an employment at will situation. Right,
but
so that says in the case of one, being there. I mean, maybe that's not the normal situation. Maybe library director does have a contract, but maybe.
But even if they were, any period of consecutive employment for more than 1 year constitutes an extension of what? Employee at will is employee at will.
If you'd like, I can research that a little bit more and get back to you guys on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not trying to nitpick Ed, but I was just reading that. Yeah, I was just reading it and I'm going, there's no such thing as an extension of employee at will. I'm an employee at will. So literally tomorrow, bank could come to me and say, unfortunately, we're going in a different direction. And it doesn't matter how long I've been in the job. That's the way it goes. So, okay.
Yeah, it is. And I'd say, Ed, maybe as part of that, the sentences that come before that, it almost seems like the trustees are looking for the ability on an annual basis to just say, yeah, this is the right person. Let's keep it going. So maybe if you could just sort of help us understand even like some of the sentences before that.
Yeah, because I mean, reading that too, I hear what you're saying, Ed. Maybe it is an option of a contract versus employee at will. But that even in that particular case, that next sentence doesn't make, in the case of the employment at will, it doesn't make any sense to me that, if I started on January 1st, employee at will, and then January 1st the next year, that's an extension. Well, that doesn't matter. It's employee will is day by day. Yeah.
I'll put together an email and send it to you guys.
Yep.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah, everything else looks. I'm sorry, Frank. Go ahead.
I just said thanks. I'm listening and I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks, Frank. All right. So I think the action item on this is we think we're going to strike that sentence. I'll make a note of that, and Ed will do some research and help us get a better understanding of the intent there.
Yeah, and we'll just need to clean up city manager and stuff like that. So
yeah, I took a note of that as well. Yep. And then I had circle back with Jason, get an understanding of if this passes, does it have other impacts? We just need to understand that. And then I think just general Jason feedback. Is there anything else in here that we should consider? So with that, I think this is another one that we keep here and we postpone to the next meeting. Does that sound right?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second it.
Great. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes. Frank?
Yes.
Great. And I am a yes. So that passes with 3 yeses. All right. So the next item on the agenda is FY 22-005. This is the change of town to city. This is an interesting one. So I feel like this is just an answer we need on whether or not this is something that we as a council want to support. And I feel like it, as you mentioned, Sean, it kind of like shows up everywhere. So this is one that I could maybe see some value putting this back to the council to just sort of get a final decision on this.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear perspectives on this one.
So when we had an initial meeting with Jason, he understood the intent of this, and I don't remember everything. He said that there were some issues that if we change from town to city, it has a cascading effect on other things. I mean, I think there are other towns out there that run by a city form of government, and they're still called town. So, I mean, and unless I'm talking out of school here, I wouldn't necessarily support this because I don't necessarily think it does. Again, it's late in the day. It doesn't do anything of substance to the charter. And I think with Jason, and he may bring it up some more, is actually by making the changes, then it may lead to us having to do additional changes, and it just doesn't see the benefit. That, again, my opinion on that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the intent of this was to really bring the charter up to date with its stated form of government. Section 1.1 of the charter says the city of Bridgewater shall constitutionally have a city form of government. So structurally, we are a city, but that obviously doesn't mean we have to call ourselves a city, and we understand that people have uneasy feelings about calling ourselves a city. And you're right, there are some towns that have kept it town, but there are many others that have changed it. So it's really consistency perspective. I think one of the councilors made a point the other night at the last meeting that said that there's no added value by doing this to the citizens. Well, I mean, there's no added value to improving punctuality either. You know, I don't necessarily think that every charter change has to be added value. But from our perspective, we felt that it made things more consistent and with where we want to be from a charter perspective. But again, it's a semantic, more of a semantic issue. And the other thing is, we expected that Jason at some point would be reviewing this to see if there were any legal implications. Now, the research that we had done with the state, we contacted a couple of people at the state level, and they said that most, if not all, of the regulations that had been separate in the past between town and city have all been sort of commonized, if you will. You know, they've been made consistent for both. So it'll be interesting to see if Jason does have anything to say on this.
Yeah, if it doesn't have any material effect throughout the charter, I have no problem changing it from town to city. To your point, Ed, I mean, we are a city form of government. We can still call ourselves the town of Bridgewater. I mean, there's no issue there. If there's no material effect by making that change, I'd have no problem with it whatsoever. That's all.
Okay. So what I could do, I did have some conversation with Jason. He did mention a few areas that he thought could have implications, and he was going to do some additional research for us. I can connect with him, and for our next meeting, I can try to actually look at those concerns. I think another one I had heard of is there is some language at the state level around population, and the word city has a specific meaning. I think it's 50,000 or something, and could drive some confusion there. So I think what I could do then is get the official list of reasons, of implications maybe. And then we in our next meeting could look at those and have a more educated or informed discussion about this. Does that sound like the right next step? We could still come to the point where we don't want to do it even with that information, or we do, but I think it's probably good to have that in front of us.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if it's not material, if it not materially affects anything else in the charter, then I mean, we can have that discussion. If it does, then we have to look at it and say, whatever it affects, does it have any issues moving forward? And I'm not trying to undo everything that the Charter Review Committee did. Like I said, personally, we act as a city. We look like a city. For the most part, we have a city form of government. If we want to change it to city, propose it that way, I wouldn't have an issue with it. Okay. We gotta grow up. We're growing up. We're growing fast.
Yeah, we are. We certainly are. Okay, so I will take the action item on this one. We'll keep it here, and then with more information, we'll try to finalize an approach on this one in our next meeting. So I think with that, maybe if I would entertain a motion to postpone to a date certain.
So moved.
Great.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And I am also a yes. So that passes 3-0. Okay, our next item is legislative branch term of office. So this is an interesting one that I think I probably need some advice on. But maybe before I jump into it, Ed, is there anything on this that you wanted to comment on? I know this has been discussed a few times. This is the one where we talk about, instead of waiting, I think it says 2 weeks or something, the second Monday, the election of a town council member takes effect the following business day. That's essentially this change.
Yeah, it basically changes it from beginning on the second Monday following the election to the next business day. And this really was just to minimize the lame duck period between being elected till the time you actually take office. So we felt it was the right thing to do.
Great.
I would support this as is.
I do too.
So a tricky thing, this is maybe more procedure question then. This same section is actually being changed in the language that is currently in front of the town council to support the redistricting. And as part of that, those changes include this change already in the actual language that's in front of us there. It's crossed out the two the second Monday and the next business day is already there in a ordinance that we're actively looking at and the council. Do we still send this back, recommending it, and then at the council we kind of figure out which of these two things to react to?
Well, I think from a procedural perspective, we need to send to the legislature ASAP the redistricting, and if it's included in there and it gets approved, then I think this ordinance becomes irrelevant.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So in that case, do we keep it here until we get an understanding?
Yeah, I would keep it here. If anyone asks, this would be one of the things. Well, again, I'm saying I'd support it as is, but this is one of the things where if it's included in the changes going up for the redistricting, if those changes get approved and it gets enacted, then we can just kill this here. We can table it because it's not needed.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. That sounds like a good approach. Frank, do you agree with that?
I agree with that. Yes.
Okay. Great. So I think with that, then I'll entertain a motion to postpone to a date certain on this one.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion passes 3-0. All right. The next one is election eligibility. And this is the one that has to do with the number of terms, right? And this is the language that says shall not exceed 4 elections to the town council. However, prior service in either at-large or district council position does not limit eligibility. I haven't prepared a side-by-side on this one, but I almost feel like this is a big enough change that we probably need to look at actual language on this. And so if we postpone this one, I can do homework to prepare the side-by-side, and then we could look at specific language to have a discussion. Does that make sense?
Can I ask a question of Ed before we do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Ed, the only part that I don't understand, I understand the intent, is prior service in either at-large or district council position does not limit eligibility. What is that like? What's the intent of that? I don't understand it.
So that is either your wording or Dennis's wording. That's not how it was actually worded coming out of the Charter Review Committee.
I don't think either one of us added that. I don't know where we got it from.
So I can tell you the way we worded it. So can I just back up, because this is actually misworded, this ordinance. It says election eligibility. So eligibility is actually section 21B, and eligibility talks about who can be eligible to hold an office. This is really term limits, which is section E, 2-1E. So it shouldn't say election eligibility, it should say term limits in the title, just to be clear on that.
Okay.
Okay. So in the way the Charter Review Committee worded it was, we basically said that a district councilor, city councilor, could not exceed 4 elections or appointments. We said or appointments, because some people are appointed, right? That's happened in the past. But then so that's essentially still 12 years, which is what we have today in the charter. Since everybody has a 3-year term, 4 elections would be 12. But then we're saying that you could expand that another 12 by running for another position. In other words, if you're a district councilor and you reached your 4 times being elected, now you could run for an at-large, and then your clock would start over again. So then you get another 4 elections. So essentially you could hold office for 24 years.
That's a scary thought.
And the reason we did that was because we felt that, we know some people don't like term limits, but we felt maybe 12 years wasn't enough time, you know, so we sort of met in the middle of the road on that one.
Yeah. No, I get it. And okay, but, and again, I'm not trying to get nitpicky. So it would be 12 years. You'd only have up to 12 years, and it doesn't have to be consecutive. It's just 12 years, either at district counselor, at large, or you know, both, like 12 and 12, correct? The only little nuance now that we need to consider on this, Eric, is when we redistrict, not everyone in the first election is running for the same amount of years. Yeah. You're going to have some people that are going to be elected for a 1-year term. So what we may want to consider to the intent, the spirit, I don't know how you word it, to Ed's point is, you know, cannot exceed 12 years, because the person who gets elected for 1 year is already lost 2 years on that. And then someone who gets elected 2 years loses a year. And then the person who gets elected for 3 years, it runs from there as well. And it's just something to kind of think about, where you want to, and I agree with it. You want to set limits, but I think also if we weren't making the changes we were making, it's very simple, right? 4 elections, 3-year terms, that's what that you run for. So, you know, I don't know if it makes sense to consider, and we can consider it later, is, you know, not exceed 12 years as a at-large counselor, or, you know, 12 years as a district counselor. Does that deliver the intent of what you're trying to get across, per se?
I think it does. Yep.
Yeah. I thought the same thing, because I think in my own situation, I'm 1 year into a term. This term will end literally after 1 year. I'll be elected for another 2. So I'll actually have 2 terms behind me if I am able to be elected within my first 3 years. I will burn 2 terms. And then maybe just another question. I think this is probably more on intent. So in a scenario like we have right now, you know, there is the opportunity for me to be a district counselor term 1, flip over and be an at-large counselor term 2. Maybe I decide to go back to district term 3. I think in that sort of like patchwork, we're still saying that's fine as long as you never do more than 4 district runs and more than 4 at large. Is that right? Because I think we actually are going to see some of that. We have to see some of this in the next one, because we have fewer district roles. And I don't know if that idea of like a counselor sort of moving in and out of district and at large.
I think it does. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I think I understand the intention here. I think I have a little bit of the history of where this one came from and some of the legal language we need to clean up. So I think this one, as I mentioned, maybe we pull up that actual language, and in our next meeting, we take a look at the words and make sure that they reflect what Sean and Ed just described. Does that sound like the right next step here?
I would think so, yeah. I mean, at that point, we can determine if there's a better way of wording it so that it takes in consideration the reorg, but keeps the intent of defining, you know, basically how much time you can spend in each seat.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I'll take the action to prepare for that next one. Frank, anything else on this one?
No, I agree with what you're saying there.
Okay. Great. So I think with that, I would entertain a motion to postpone to a date certain on this one.
So moved.
Second.
Right. Great, thank you. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And I am a yes. So that's 3-0. Motion passes. All right, the next one is the annual stipend.
My name should not be on this.
Ah, okay.
I do not support this, but anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Well, that's the first change that we'll make then.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
All right. So yeah, this is the request to the town councilor shall receive an annual stipend of $3,000, but shall not be eligible for any other city provided benefits or pension. And this amount shall only be amended to a 2/3 vote of council.
Yeah. So I would say right off the bat, if we were to move this, I would make a motion to delete and further such stipend amount shall be amended by 2/3 of the council. The council should not be voting on increasing their stipend.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Jason actually said that we would be.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're not the feds here. So
I took that note. So I know a question here just in terms of open items, and then Ed, I'd be curious to get your input on this too, but there was some question as to the actual payment of this. And, if it's not defined in the charter, we need to make sure we define it somewhere, because there's the idea of an elected term, which is different from the fiscal year calendar, which is different from the annual calendar. And so I think if we do move forward with this, there probably needs to be some matching language that talks about just kind of how that's paid.
I think it would probably be in the admin code. And if I were to recommend, it would be monthly. If you sit in the seat, you get a monthly, I don't know, 1/12 of $3,000.
Yeah.
$250.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that on a monthly basis. And when should it start? As soon as you take the seat.
But I think that would be included in the admin code.
Yeah.
So the charter will say you get $3,000. The admin code says you get it over the course of 12 months, or over the course of your term per year.
Each 12 month period of your term.
Yeah.
Right.
And then in the admin code, we would say paid monthly.
Yep.
First payment to be issued, blah, blah, blah.
Beginning of the month. And then if that person ceases to hold the seat, they suspend all payments on a go forward basis till that particular position is replaced by another candidate.
Got it. Okay. Let me just make some notes on that. Okay. So I think maybe with this one, we just pull up, there isn't existing language on this already. Or Ed, actually, do you have anything to add on this one? And is there language to be changed or just added?
Language is exactly the same as what we recommended, minus what Sean indicated be deleted. I think that was inserted by Dennis, maybe, I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, the committee felt very strongly that, this was warranted based on the amount of time and effort and sacrifice that the counselors make. It's actually on the lower end of the scale money-wise compared to our neighboring towns and cities. So, there was, I think it was unanimous in terms of supporting this. Now, the issue obviously becomes if that $3,000 number, you want to change it at some point, it's going to require a charter change, right? Maybe that was what Dennis's motivation was to put that in.
I got the feeling that when it comes to the council level, there's probably going to be a proposed amendment to the amount.
Okay. All right. So,
but that to Ed, to your point, once we land on a number and it gets approved by the legislature, then that stays in until someone proposes another charter change that has to go to the legislature and then has to go to the voters.
Right. So at minimum, it'll be 10 years from now.
Yeah. So with inflation, that $3,000 will be $30 in 10 years.
Pretty close to what we're making now.
Okay, so for this one, maybe as a next step, should I actually just pull the language, propose something, and then we can?
What I'd like to do is propose an amendment to strike out and further that such stipend amount shall be amended by a 2/3 vote of the council.
Okay.
So, I mean, basically other, city provided benefits not eligible, right? And just leave it at that.
Okay. Do we need a second to that then?
Yeah, Eric, okay. Just discussion on that. You're concerned about 10 years, you vote this in and it's going to be there for 10 years without a change. Then maybe it could be a clause that says the stipend will be raised at the rate of inflation. So if the government comes out and says, well, here we are with a 3.4% inflation this year or 7%, whatever it is, then it's an automatic raise to keep it looking like it's that same amount of money.
That's interesting. So we build into this the rate of increase to match inflation.
And you got a legitimate source of the number for the increase.
You're going to have to mention at what point in time that inflation number is chosen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So maybe should we handle Sean's motion first, and then I can take a note on that, Frank, and we can come back with language in the next.
Sure. I'll second his motion.
Great, thanks. So again, this is a motion to strike the language and further that such stipend amount shall be only be amended by a 2/3 vote of the council. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And I am a yes. So that passes 3-0. Then I took the note that we want to come up with some language to propose about a rate of increase that keeps it aligned with inflation. So for a next step here, I think I can prepare another one of these sheets where we can just look at the actual words and in the next meeting, propose that wording. Does that make sense?
Yep, that made perfect sense.
Okay. So then I think this is the same, would entertain a motion to postpone to a date certain.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion passes 3-0. All right, what do we have next? This was stipend. The next one is ordinance FY 22-009. This is the recall provision. This is also a long one. Ed, is there any background you can provide us on this one?
The only background I have on this is that we pretty much adopted and accepted what the prior Charter Review Committee and the prior Rules and Procedures Committee had come up with. So basically, this has gone through many iterations, and we supported it. Now, the one thing I wouldn't mention is on the title again. It's not Article 2. It's Article 3. And it would be Section 3, probably 3.3 is where we put it. And it's not necessarily the legislative branch. So this would be the ability to recall any elected official. So that means the library trustees, the town clerk, since they're the only other elected officials we have right now. So that's the reason it's not in Article 2, because that's just the legislative branch. It would be under 3, which is elected officials.
Okay. And do you know, does that align with the prior Rules and Procedures recommendation? Did they have it sort of split out too?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Any questions for Ed on that one, Frank or Sean?
No, I've seen this before, so no.
No questions.
Okay. So then I would entertain a motion to postpone to a date certain on this one too.
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Motion passes 3-0. All right, we've got two more here. The next one is FY 22-010. This is the town manager term of office. And this was language. The charter shall be amended to reflect that the council shall appoint a city manager to a maximum 5-year renewable term. And this was one we did receive feedback. I can confirm with Jason that I think there was already a 5-year limit on this. Does that sound familiar?
Mass law for contracts, you can't go any farther than 5 years. So I understand that we don't want to have a 8-year contract for a city manager, but my understanding, and Jason can confirm it, is by mass law we can't go any farther than 5, and we've been going 3, even lower than that. But
okay.
The footnote, we put 3.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the charter committee proposed.
Yeah, I would, to be honest, I would not this is my opinion, I wouldn't support that. I know we've done it.
Okay.
I know we've done it by practice, but if by law we have the ability to go up to 5 years, and I'm talking, in the future, I don't necessarily know if we want to bring that number down below what is allowed by law. That would be my input. Sorry, Frank.
We currently have it as 3, and I don't see why we don't just leave it there. I think 3 is a good number. Let the manager prove his ability and his performance over a 3-year period of time, and then we decide. If he's done well, I mean, what term is he in right now? His 4th. So it's not a matter of every 3 years we can him.
Right, but I'm looking at this down the road when we've all moved on to, quote unquote, bigger and better things. I'd want future town councils to have the ability to go up to what is allowable by mass law. Let them decide.
But wouldn't that have the town manager pushing to get a 5-year contract next time?
He's asked for that, and we've said no.
Yes, he did, but it doesn't mean it's going to carry that way.
Well, if he asks for it and we say no, then we part ways.
Not necessarily.
So maybe just
again. I'll say this: I would not support a 3-year limit on a contract. I would allow it to go up to 5 and let each individual council decide how far they want to go to. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think maybe if I could build off that, I do feel like this is a point of negotiation. There aren't many points of negotiation. This is, I think, probably an important one. I think to the earlier point, if there's an ask for 5, that usually enters into other conversations around, okay, what does that actually mean now? Like, what are we negotiating for to get 5? Or to 3. My concern is if we limit it at 3, you're now negotiating in a window of 1, 2, or 3. Like you've kind of significantly, I think, changed the negotiation aspect of this. So I agree. I feel like 5 as an upper limit is good. It probably allows it to be used as a tool appropriately in a negotiation.
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking at this, Frank, as the next town manager, not the current one, the next one where he or she may come in and want 4 years, right, for the first term. And the council looks around, 4 years is in play, and they feel, so obligated. Let them decide to go in that direction. Again, to Eric's point, if you're hamstrung at 3 years, you may actually lose people that would want a little bit longer. But again, someone come in and want 6, say, nope, we can only do 5, and even then, we don't have to necessarily offer someone 5.
Yeah.
But what are the local towns around us doing?
They're all over the place. I've yet to see any town less than 3, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I've seen 4. I've seen 3 and 4. I don't think I've ever seen 5, but I haven't looked that deep. So, but again, a city or town couldn't go any longer than 5 anyway.
Yeah, but
yeah. And I can do a little research on this, but my sense, I think it is. I
still feel that 3 years, because what you're doing is you're tying the hands of the council. Hey, you got him in there for 5 years, you live with him. Just look at the way everything has been written up and all the power he's given, and the council has nothing as far as most of what running the town goes. Oh yeah, we have the power to approve whether or not we're going to receive money. But, somewhere along the line, you have some kind of a control. And I think that 3-year thing helps trying to keep the town manager online, doing what he should be doing and getting it done. Not just saying, hey, what the heck, I got 5 years, Well, that's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I agree with that. I mean, I think as a negotiated term, 3 is the right number. But I think maybe to Sean's point, you can imagine this market gets pretty competitive And, we're at a point in the future where, the town manager is retired. We're trying to compete with other towns.
Yeah. It's at least 3 more years and we'll be through this whole crisis that we're looking at right now. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, I thought that 2 years ago. Or a year ago. All right. So I think we probably have a few options here. I think one is we could do a motion to amend this to 3 years and sort of let that run through. The other is I can just get some information around the other towns and we can continue the discussion in the next meeting.
Well, I'd make a motion to do it for 3 years and let it get before the full council. Okay. They can always amend it there if they want.
All right. Is there a second? Okay. I think I will choose not also to second it, Frank. I do believe in 5-1. Sorry. So I don't think so procedurally, I probably need some coaching on this one. If there's a motion and there is not a second.
And
there's no motion. There is no motion if you don't get a second.
There's no change.
Mm-hmm.
And now if you want, we can put this on for a date certain to come back to us to kind of finalize.
Okay. Yeah, I think let's do that. And then Frank, you can certainly propose the motion in the larger council too, right? So if we could, I would entertain a motion to postpone to a date certain.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And I am a yes. And I see Ed, your hand's up. Apologies. Ed, did you have a comment?
I did, but not on the term. There was something else I wanted to mention. So you done voting or?
We did postpone it. If you have a comment, though, feel free to share it.
Okay. So in addition to, I'm looking at what we recommended for this, we had always had the 3-year renewable term, but we also added a sentence, and I don't know if you want to include that other sentence now or make that entertained as a possible other ordinance or whatever, but we got a lot of feedback from people in the surveys that we did, in the forums that we did, that really centered around the frustration, the appearance of frustration that the council had with the town manager. And so the verbiage that we put in there said, since the council bears ultimate responsibility for the management of the city manager must serve at the will of the council and is bound by whatever legislative policy action the city council takes. Now, I know that if you guys pass legislation that the town manager is supposed to act upon, then that is supposed to happen. But this was a way of saying it in the charter that made it clear. There was no ambiguity about it. If somebody ever questioned anything, you can point right to the charter and say, the town manager serves at the will of the council, and legislatively, whatever they act upon, he needs to follow, period. So that's up to you whether you want to adopt that or not. I just wanted to remind you of that.
Great. Thank you, Ed. I appreciate that background. Okay. And when we next look at this, I'll pull up the language between the original, the proposed, and then we'll agree on the final there. All right, so I think we are at our last ordinance of the night. This is FY 22-011, administrative organizations. And this is actually the city attorney term limits. If you remember, Jason advised us that he's an employee at will. And so he felt that this actually didn't apply as written. Ed, is there any background on this one you want to share with us?
So I guess we didn't really understand, this hired situation. But what we're trying to do is bring that position in line with, all the other positions. Just because it's at will right now, does that mean it's always going to stay at will? And from our perspective, the town attorney represents the town. And I think there, again, feedback that we've received, or the committee received, was that there's an appearance that the attorney was really supporting the town manager, and that the council didn't have a lot of influence over, you know, and since the council is the body that represents the people, and the attorney is supposed to represent the people, there was really who should be appointing the attorney, and then what kind of term should the attorney have and be held accountable to. So that's why we felt that, I mean, why is it that the attorney serves at will? I mean,
I think that's because most attorneys are in attorneys at will. I can try to find out. I don't know of any attorneys that are under contract for a city or a town.
Okay. Does the attorney get a performance review by anybody?
Town manager.
He's responsible. Okay. Yeah, he's responsible for giving all the reviews.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to see some of the other versions of this. I do know there are other towns that contract with a law firm, like a larger law practice, versus sort of an individual.
May I? There was a discussion on different types of contracts that they had from different towns, and some of them limited what the town attorney did under his contract, and then beyond that, the town would be billed separate fee, and that was a concern. Okay, where in our case, he has a set salary for each year, and I guess back when the town manager recommended him and the council approved his recommendation, and that made him an employee at will. And as long as the town manager continues to have him there, he's there. We get a new town manager, he could go or he could stay, but that's how he got there to begin with.
Thanks, Frank. Any other conversation on this or history that would be relevant here? So,
nothing. It's just it's interesting. I get what Ed's saying, but like anything else, there's multitude of approaches to this. But I mean, I personally wouldn't support putting our attorney on contract if we have him as an employee at will. That gives much more flexibility than if you're under a contract.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this ordinance as written, I don't think we can push it forward because it's not aligned with just the legal scenario here. But I do appreciate there might be other conversation and maybe another sort of version of this ordinance that could be presented if we aligned on other opinions there. But I feel like for this, sorry, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, the other thing that popped into my mind, and I know we discussed at length, was that the council, every time the council tries to question or challenge one of the department heads, it becomes an issue because supposedly you're overstepping your bounds, right? Mm-hmm. But yet the city attorney is technically a department head, right? Head of the legal department, but yet is supposed to be representing the whole town. So you should be, as a council, you should be able to challenge the city attorney at will, I would think, but yet are you still bound by the same issue as if you go to challenge the police chief or the fire chief? So it's an interesting scenario, and I think we felt as a committee that it needs to be relooked at and potentially make some changes to that one position because it is a different position. It's different from the other department heads. And so we took a stab at it, and this is what we come up with, but that's the background, and I can share with you a little more if you're interested.
Yeah, before we go further, Frank, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I remember a while back when it was a lengthy discussion on the town council members unable to have any type of communications with department heads. And the town manager came back, and it's in writing. I probably have it over there in my file somewhere. He said that the whole meaning behind it is no council member can talk to any department employee other than the department head.
That's wrong. That's wrong. And we've had Jason say on numerous occasions that the town council cannot tell a department head or an employee how to do their job. There's nothing that said, hold on, Frank.
Yep.
There's nothing that says that a town councilor cannot have a discussion with a department head, because I've had multiple discussions with department heads just getting information, and I've yet to have the town manager or the town attorney step in and say, you're not allowed to do that.
No, I guess you misunderstood what I said. His answer to us was, we can't talk to, clearly defined, we cannot speak to any member of any department except for the department head. Okay, so that's the only person in any department in the entire town that we can have direct contact and communication with. It was very clear, spelt right out, because some people were trying to talk with people within different departments and stuff. And that's why all this came up.
So maybe just to jump in here, I think there are probably, maybe 3 different discussions. I think the one right now is, I think we actually do have the power of inquiry over the entire town. I think that's actually written in the charter right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the second thing is, like, can we actually give work direction? And there's probably some conversation there.
We can't do that.
Yeah. So I think that
we have to Ed's earlier, we have to approve an order to order the town manager to do something that hasn't already, he or she has or not have been already instructed to do. Yeah. And I think Ed, to your earlier point where we kind of lost direction on that was, instead of a meeting, not being able to tell him what to do, if we put an order together and the council approves it, he has to execute on it. That is in the charter. I don't know exactly where, but I can't remember the last time we went through for a while a formalized order, but we've done it. Now executing on it is the other part of the equation, but that's not for here. But to get back to this, it's an interesting point, Ed. I don't look at Jason as the head of the legal department because he's only one, but you're right, he is head of the legal department. So we can probably have some more discussion on that. But I wouldn't put him under a contract, but we need to have more discussion on, do we propose that position being appointed and report to the council, or does it stay at the town manager? I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. And it sounds like even outside of this, we'd probably benefit from just somebody presenting to us how that role works and boundaries there, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, we put it to the voters, but I think we have to be like anything else, that there needs to be an education on what the pros and the cons are. I'm not trying to push it either way, but what we did, Eric, was when we did the last charter proposal, we did have like town halls, I guess I'd call them, or get-togethers, and we went through everything and allowed people to ask questions and things like that. So I'm getting ahead of myself on this. So when we're all done with this and it comes back for the legislature, we still need to have a plan so that we can get in small groups people together, go through everything, ask questions, so that when they walk in to vote, they're as informed as possible. But anyway, yeah, I'm way ahead of it. We haven't even gotten to that point yet.
No, but this is good. And so I think maybe then for this one, does it sound like we table this and do a little more research to just understand more about?
Yep. I'd make that motion, not to table. Make a motion to move.
Yeah.
Make a motion to move to date cert.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second it.
All right. We'll put it to roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And I am a yes. All right. We got through a lot tonight. So we've got 2 more items. Next thing is public comment. Do we have any public comments? All right. And then before we adjourn, I know we talked about looking at calendars and maybe picking a next date. Could we take a minute just to do that?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Just pulling mine up here. Do we want to try to meet next week? The following week is the holiday week. So that might be challenging. Next week, I think, is a town council meeting on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
I could really do any other day next week.
How about Wednesday, the 22nd?
Yeah, that would be good. 7 o'clock?
Yes, that's good for me.
Okay. We will put that in stone and then connect with Debbie to get the invite and the agenda posted for that. All right, I think that's it. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All right, roll call vote. Sean?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Thank you, Ed, for your time. Appreciate it. And thanks, everybody else. We'll see everybody next week.
Thank you, Ed. Sean?
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
See you next.
Have a good night.
Night. See you Tuesday.